Good evening, everyone, and along with my good friend, the Executive Director and the Chief Executive Officer of the Brain Research Foundation, Dr. Terry Constantine, welcome to the BRF's virtual discovery event. My name is Rob Johnson, and I'm honored to be your MC tonight because I'm a big supporter of and believer in the BRF and the amazing work they're doing to benefit those with neurological issues. I'm also a former board member. It's been my privilege to MC this event for more than a decade. I was drawn to the cause because my family, like too many others, has been touched by some sort of issue like this. I remain committed today because I've seen the impact BRF's seed grants are making. BRF is an undisputed leader in neuroscience. The foundation funds a wide range of innovative research that gives us a better understanding of the human brain. Through this vital funding, BRF is transforming our knowledge of brain function and accelerating critical neurological breakthroughs. This night, this event, supports these efforts, and we feel so fortunate to have all of you by our side. Tonight, we will also honor a man who is a pillar in our city. Marty Nesbitt, the founder and co-CEO of Vistria Group, will receive BRF's Community Service Award in recognition of all he has done to make our region a better place to live. Now, before I go on, I want to be sure to mention our stellar group of event co-chairs, Norm Bobbins, Rich Chaffetz, Kip Kirkpatrick, Peter Pond, and someone you'll be hearing from later in our program, BRF Chairman Scott Sirota. They have all worked hard to make this event a success, and we're grateful beyond words for what they've done and continue to do for BRF. I've often said that this is one event that I come away feeling a little smarter and more informed because of our panel discussions, and tonight won't be an exception. This year, our conversation is entitled Restoring Movement and Touch to Paralysis Patients with a Brain-Computer Link. Led by Dr. Constantine, it will include Dr. Nicholas Hatsopoulos and Dr. John Downey, both from the University of Chicago, and patient Scott Embry. And it's important to note that BRF seed grants allowed Dr. Hatsopoulos to move this idea from basic research to a life-changing clinical trial. Research, trials, and discoveries are made possible through the generosity of friends like all of you who are watching this evening. BRF's impact would not be possible without you and your support. You will see on your screen a way you can make a gift. Simply go to brf.org/donate. Anything you can do is appreciated and will help talented scientists make medical breakthroughs that will change lives. And now I'm pleased to introduce my friend, Dr. Terry Constantine. She's been at the helm of BRF for 20 years. She's dedicated, smart, and determined. With her background as a trained scientist, Terry understands the importance of research and the funding challenge experienced by scientists. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Terry Constantine. Terry, great to be with you as always.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for being such a great friend to Brain Research Foundation. Since 1953, BRF has supported cutting-edge neuroscience research, and our mission hasn't wavered over those 69 years because, unfortunately, everyone knows someone struggling with a brain-related issue like autism, dementia, or depression. We need to continue to fund scientific discoveries to find new treatments and cures. BRF finds the most innovative neuroscience research projects in the nation, and we fund them with seed money. We are the angel investors of brain research. We invest small amounts of startup money into new and brilliant ideas so scientists can catapult their research into larger projects funded by the National Institutes of Health. And how do we know we are supporting the best research ideas? We carefully measure our return on investment by assessing how the research has progressed and how much money is raised after our initial seed investment to continue discoveries. We can say that for every dollar BRF awards, an average of $28 in additional funding is awarded to the scientist to pursue their research. By any standards, 1 to 28 is an extraordinary return on investment. None of this funding is possible without the generous contributions of our donors, and I want to thank all of you watching who are supporting our Discovery event. Without you, we would not be able to continue our mission. I want to thank my Board of Trustees. I could not ask for a better group of ambassadors for BRF. And I would like to thank tonight's co-chairs, Norm Bobbins, Rich Chaffetz, Kip Kirkpatrick, Peter Pond, and Scott Sirota. Thank you all for your leadership and commitment to BRF's Discovery event. I also want to thank Scott Sirota as our new chair of the foundation. He is passionate about BRF's mission and a leader that leads by example. It has been a pleasure working with him during his first year as chair, and I look forward to working with him for many more. And now I am very pleased to turn the program over to Scott, who will be telling you a little bit more about why BRF is so important to him. Scott?
Thank you so much, Terry, and for all the kind words. It's been an honor to work together. As stated, I am Scott Sirota. I'm the chair of the Brain Research Foundation Board of Trustees. For 5 years, I have served as a trustee, and when asked to chair the board late last year, I did not hesitate to take on this new role and honor. The Brain Research Foundation's mission to provide us with more knowledge on how the brain functions is very important to me, and I've seen firsthand how their startup funding is making a difference. When tasked with determining who should receive our Community Service Award, I also didn't hesitate to nominate tonight's recipient, Marty Nesbitt. Marty has a long history of making a difference in our community through his work on nonprofit boards like the Chicago Housing Authority and the Obama Foundation. And as an entrepreneur, he is keenly aware of how important it is that startup funding be made available to the best and brightest minds in all facets of enterprises, so that we may help accelerate the best ideas to the most ideal outcomes. This is especially true in neuroscience. Marty, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Brain Research Foundation, please accept the Frederick A. Gibbs Award in Community Service.
Thank you, Scott. It's quite an honor to be recognized by an organization like the BRF that has been dedicated to the research of the brain for over 60 years, almost 70. 70 years of supporting scientists and researchers all over the country that have been leading the way on advancing our understanding of the brain. There's a lot of frontier out there, more for us to learn, more for us to know. The whole world stands to continue to benefit from the continued commitment of everybody that works at BRF, Terry under her leadership, and the entire staff. We honor and appreciate your work. And for all those scientists and researchers out there that continue to explore the complexities of the brain for the benefit of all of us. So thank you. It's such an honor, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Marty. I can't think of a more worthy recipient. There is not one person among us that doesn't know someone or will themselves one day be touched by an issue, injury, or disease of the brain and nervous system. Brain Research Foundation provides the hope we need for treatments and cures. Thank you to my fellow trustees, once again to Marty, and especially to all of you here tonight.
Thank you, Scott, and congratulations, Marty. So well deserved. Next up is our much anticipated panel discussion, but before we enjoy that, I want to ask again for your help. BRF simply cannot do what they do without your generous support. Revenue raised through this event will enable BRF to continue funding the best and brightest scientists. These scientists will make groundbreaking research projects grow into new therapies and cures. We hope all of you watching will consider making a fully tax-deductible gift. You can give with the knowledge that every dollar you contribute will go to this research and will ultimately change the lives of people challenged by neurological injuries and disease. Please join by going to thebrf.org/donate. No contribution is too big or too small. Thank you. We appreciate your consideration. And now it's time for our panel discussion, Restoring Movement and Touch to Paralysis Patients with a Brain-Computer Link. I know this is going to be fascinating. And to moderate, once again, here's Dr. Terry Constantine. Terry.
Thank you, Rob. Now I would like to introduce our panelists who will be talking about a current clinical trial testing a brain-machine interface in people with paralysis. The goal, to restore movement and touch. First, Dr. Nico Hatsopoulos is a professor in the Department of Organismal Biology and Anatomy at the University of Chicago. Dr. Hatsopoulos' lab focuses on how neurons in brain's motor cortex control movement. And Mr. Scott Embry is a participant in that clinical trial. He will be telling us his story and why he decided to be part of the study. And Dr. John Downey is a staff scientist at the University of Chicago. Dr. Downey is a biomedical engineer and serves as the project lead for the clinical trial. We're very pleased to have all of you with us. Like most brain research, this is complicated, and it has been years in the making to get to a clinical trial. First, let me start with you, Nico, because that's where BRF's journey with this project began. In 2002, BRF awarded you your first seed grant. In 2008, BRF awarded you another one to expand your project. What were you trying to accomplish at that time, and how important was BRF's funding for you to move your research forward?
Well, thanks, Terry. Yeah, I mean, I was a young assistant professor, just started my job at the University of Chicago, and I was trying to build up my lab to really understand, before sort of building up to something like this clinical trial, understanding how the motor parts of the brain, particularly the motor cortex, works and controls movements of the arm and the hand. And so we're basically trying to understand the language that the brain uses to control, to send signals down to control the arm and the hand. So this involved doing studies in non-human primates who were intact, who could move their arms, and trying to relate the brain activity from groups of neurons in the motor cortex, relate that to the movements that we saw the non-human primates perform.
And so you were trying to read what the
We're trying to
neurons were
read,
doing?
exactly. We're trying to decode
Okay,
those,
decipher it.
decipher it.
And then what were you going to do with that information?
So once we could decipher it, we could then use that to build a decoder, basically, kind of like, you know, in Germany when the Allies tried to decode, you know, the Enigma code. They're trying to understand. Once we have that decoder, we can then use it ultimately in people such as Scott, where Scott can think about moving, apply the decoder, and then use that to control up an artificial device.
And so what were you able to do with the initial funding that we gave you? You were able to use that, generate results, and then get more additional funding. Is that correct?
That's correct. So again, this was all basic research. You had to understand how the normal system works, understand the link between the brain and movements of the arm and the hand. Getting that basic understanding then formed the foundation for ultimately using it for a clinical brain-machine interface.
And so you got one of the original kind of seed grants
Yeah.
that was, I think, $25,000. And with that, you did a lot. And
I
you
did.
were able to get, what? I think $4 million in additional funding to keep your research moving forward, right?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. It helped a lot, especially as a junior assistant professor. You know, you're struggling, starting up your lab, and you need these basic resources to really get going. And it was really important to me.
And so let's now fast forward
Yeah.
years of research,
Yes.
many collaborations later,
That's right.
and now it's a clinical trial.
That's great.
And it's a huge undertaking. I think part of it, you know, is the collaborations. Can you tell me about some of them?
Well, the most relevant one is this collaboration we have with the University of Pittsburgh right now. So the University of Pittsburgh, from which John came from, that institution, and now is the project lead on our project here. They were the first group to incorporate not only the ability to decode signals from the motor cortex, but also provide artificial tactile touch sense. And that's what's novel in our clinical trial. The ability to not only control devices, but also be able to feel what you're touching, interacting with.
And this is a $7 million grant now
Yeah,
between the two of you.
Yeah, it's a big proposal. And you know, we had over the years developed a relationship with University of Pittsburgh, and they were interested in expanding to more than one clinical site, because it's no good to be able to show you can do this in one site. You have to show that this generalizes to many sites, and that's what we're trying to do right now. And it's been good. It's been really fun.
Well, in addition to neuroscientists, there are neurosurgeons, psychiatrists, right? Computer scientists, and a very important biomedical engineer. And John, that's where you come in, right? Specifically, what did you do as a biomedical engineer, and what is your role as the project lead?
Yeah, that's right. So as a biomedical engineer, I serve to bring together the worlds of the basic science understanding of biology and mix it in with the more hard engineering disciplines. So, for instance, for a project like this, we need to go from the very soft, individual cells in the brain that are processing the concept of a movement, bring the information out from them and go to an electrical motor and a robotic arm that moves the way the person wants. So biomedical engineering is really a great discipline to have learned those variety of skills to bring those two worlds together.
And of course, all the research and collaboration is necessary, right, to get it to a clinical trial. But you really need something very important, and he's sitting right here. You need a participant, somebody that will agree to do this, right? And that's Scott. And Scott, could you tell us your story? Specifically, what happened that made you a candidate for this?
All right, Terry. Back in 1985, I was 22 years old. And I was coming home from work, and I got in a car accident, real bad car accident, obviously, and I broke my neck. 5 days later, I woke up in the hospital, and the first thing that I was told from the doctor at 6 o'clock in the morning is, you've been in an accident, you're going to be a quadriplegic, you'll never be able to use your hands or legs again. And I just shook my head, and right then, I'm like, no, I'm not going to be like this. For a while, I was paralyzed. I was a complete quad. And I was determined to learn how to be able to walk again and use my hands and all that. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, but you've made amazing progress. I mean, I met you maybe 2 years ago, or not quite.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, the first time, and I just could tell that you just had that drive to do it, and the drive to be a part of this
Yes, ma'am.
clinical trial, right? What made you do this clinical trial?
Well, it's like going through. I was transferred down to Northwestern, and that's where I did finished up with my broken neck and everything. And then I went to the Chicago Rehabilitation Center, and I became friends with a lot of people. I was in there for like 4 months actually, between the hospital and RIC. And I became really good friends with a lot of the people, a lot of spinal cord injury people and everything. And I was lucky. I basically walked out of there. I mean, pushing a wheelchair, obviously, but I walked out of there, and I know there was a lot of people that I became friends with there that will never, ever have that opportunity. And so, over the years, as time went on, the early 90s and stuff, I started looking for things how I could pay back some of the blessings that I got out of, my abilities, even though I struggle and everything. I had to repay that somehow. Not that I really owed anyone, but, in my heart, it was like, how can I help someone, How can I give back some of the blessings that I got with my injury? And so I started looking for research that was taking place. And one of the big things in the mid to late 90s was the stem cell therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to apply for that numerous times, and it's like, no, we need a new injury.
Right.
And so I just kept looking, and over time, I sort of maybe stopped looking as much because I felt like kind of defeated. And then about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was talking to a female doctor that does research, and she says, Scott, go to the website. There's like a national website, that the government has, and then you could also look on Northwestern because they tell about a lot of studies and everything. So I went to both the websites that she gave me, and I found 3 out of the numerous ones they had. And the first one that I liked the most was obviously this research, with the robotic arm. I'm like, wow, that sounds really cool. That's totally me. I know I could help them.
But I mean, it's it's an endeavor, and it required surgery,
Right.
right? I mean, you
Right.
signed up for a long haul, right? I mean, and so I'm going to ask you, Nico, a little bit about the surgery and the neurosurgeon you had to get on board, because when I was involved with you originally, right, you were doing the surgeries. Well, not we
No.
weren't involved at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
With the funding, but
Yeah.
that's what we had talked about. You were doing it, but now you can't do that on human,
No.
and so you've got to recruit a
Yes.
neurosurgeon, and not only recruit somebody, they have to figure out how to do this. Right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so there's a functional neurosurgeon at the University of Chicago, Peter Warnke, that I'd known for years because I'd been interacting with him. He puts different kinds of devices in the brain, including probably you're familiar with deep brain stimulators for Parkinson's. So he does that routinely, and so I knew about him, and we approached him with this, and he said, "Sounds really exciting," and but he had never done this particular procedure. You know, generally the procedure, I talked to him actually the other day about this. I said, I mean, how do you view this procedure? And he says, it's pretty routine. There's some certain unique aspects of the surgery that are particular to the implant that make it challenging. And he had to learn that. And so what we did is we got a hold of a cadaver and we actually practiced. He practiced with a cadaver.
Lucky for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And so how long did the surgery take?
about 5 hours.
5 hours.
But, that was putting 4 of these little chips. Actually, I have a little image.
Oh, yeah.
I have a little example right here. So this is an example of one of these chips.
So there are 4 of those in there.
There are 4 of them in there. This one has 100 electrodes in it.
Okay.
So he's got 2 of those in there, and then he has another 2 that have 32 channels each, 32 electrodes. So
I mean, tiny, like the
They're
size
really-
of what? Not even a
they're-
pencil eraser,
yeah,
right?
they're really, really tiny.
Yeah.
Smaller than your pinky nail. Very, very small. And each electrode is really tiny. So, he put in 4 of these with his resident in 5 hours. I mean, when I do it with the non-human primates, it'll take me 12 hours to put in 2. So they're very talented.
Good thing we got the numbers,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Okay. And so how long did it take for you to recover?
I think I was ready to get out of the hospital the next morning when I woke up. So
Okay.
it was really actually very easy. I know my tolerance for pain is very, very high, but I didn't have any pain at all.
Okay. And then, John, how long did it take before you could start, doing some,
Yeah, so we can pretty much start doing our recordings as soon as he's ready and out of the hospital. Sometimes we have to wait a little bit for some swelling on the scalp to go down just to be able to connect the cables securely. But I believe we did our first recording 3 days after the surgery this time.
wow, wow. And can you give us a brief description, John, of what is happening? I mean, you go down, I think, 3 times a week, unless that's changed,
Yep,
right? And
that's
it's about
correct.
4 hours
Yes,
each
ma'am.
time. Can you tell us, what is happening during that? one of
Right,
those
so we
sessions?
do different types of sessions depending on the day. So one type of session is what we would call a motor control session, where we would give him control of either the hand or the arm or both, and have him use a often virtual prosthetic robotic arm and reach out to targets that we place in the space around him. He'll grab those targets and carry them to new locations. And so we can work on better ways for him to control the force in the hand and better ways for him to make direct and quick movements.
And
other-
that's all with virtual reality?
And that's all in virtual reality. He wears goggles while he has the cables connected to his pedestals, we call them, there on his head, to record the signals. The other type of session we can do, and sometimes we do both, but is a stimulation session. So this is where we send very, very small pulses of electricity back into the brain, specifically into the area of the brain that processes the sense of touch on the hand. And when we send pulses into that area, we can evoke the sense of touch localized to specific fingertips, depending on which electrode we stimulate on. And so for a session like that, we're working on how best to stimulate the brain to make these sensations feel the most natural and the most recognizable, so that when we bring those two together, he can grab something with that robotic hand and then feel it through as though it were being grabbed with his own hand. And so those are the sessions we do. We do those in separate pieces, and then sometimes we bring them together to see how they're working in tandem.
And so that's important if you're going to go, you want to be able to grasp something, but you don't want to smash it if it's an egg, right? And you want to know if it's hot or anything like that, right? And so that's why, just moving something is terrific, obviously, but that adding the sense of touch and sensation is really, really key. And what does it feel like?
Well, when they first started doing it, it was very electrical feeling. Imagine putting the transistor battery on your tongue, okay? So you get it like a electrical
Oh, like a
stimulus,
little
okay?
zap?
But like a real low charge,
Okay.
like when it's almost dead, okay?
Okay.
So it was nothing painful or anything. So, but it took time to figure out, to translate how I started feeling it. But there were a couple of the channels, as soon as they stimulated them, it was a sensation I could relate to instantly. The one is like there's a couple channels on the back of my thumb when they do. It actually feels like I'm reaching into an evergreen bush and pulling the pine needles out. So I'm getting like the stickle in the back, the pricks, yes. Another one that was like instant, it feels like I'm touching my cell phone on the table when it's on vibrate, and it had that vibration feeling. Now there was a couple that took me a long time to learn what was I actually feeling. They felt magnetic, like pushing two magnets that are opposite of each other, and it sort of gives that resistance. And then the one day I was rubbing my finger after they stimulated. I'm like, oh, that's like real deep tissue pulling on the inside of my finger. And so the funny thing about this is, now when they give me the different stimulation, once I figure out what it actually feels like, every time they do it, my brain is like programmed to, that's what I'm feeling,
But do they tell you what the stimulation is going to be?
No. They just say, okay, we're going to stimulate you, and then they ask me to report to
Okay.
them
Okay.
how I'm feeling it or where I'm feeling it.
And were these descriptions surprising, or do you think this is what he was going to say, how he described them?
Well, there's a diversity of descriptors that
Okay.
the subjects, like going back to the subject at the University of Pittsburgh, there's a whole different variety of things people say. So we were expecting a variety.
Okay.
But one of the goals of this project is to try to refine the stimulation so that it feels more natural.
Okay.
So it feels like he's actually touching something real.
Okay.
That's one of the goals.
Okay. And John, I heard, and Nico told me, that something happened just recently that was really exciting, that it wasn't just the virtual, that he did something else in the during one
Yeah,
of
so
the sessions.
we've recently got a robotic arm and hand up and running, and so now he can, so the virtual robotic hand is very great, and presenting objects in virtual space is much easier than in the real world, but now he has the ability to move it's a big, it doesn't even really look like a normal human arm. It's very much an industrial robotic looking arm, but he can move it around as though it were his own. It goes where he wants. We were able to shake hands with it and have him high five in different places and all of that. And so, yeah, so that's been a recent development that we've been able to implement.
And did it feel the same?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
everything
it was
the
it was the same type of thought process and everything. And the thing that's really amazing about this whole study is, the way John and Nico have developed this decoder, the collaboration and everything, is it's very natural. You know, it's like a lot of times I control it much better when I'm sitting there talking to the people in the room and not overthinking it. Because like when I start overthinking it, I start losing control, and it becomes very natural when I'm talking or just being very relaxed
Makes sense.
and it's amazing how this technology is going to be real for, you know, go to the Walmart and buy your robotic arm. You know, I mean, maybe that's, you know, that's maybe a little overreach, but
No, I
you
mean,
know,
I
I
love
mean-
it, and I love your enthusiasm,
Yeah,
right? I
no,
mean,
it's-
was
it's-
it what you thought it was going to be? I mean,
everything and
because you
more.
put
It was,
in, okay,
it was like, just the way I imagined it, how it could be, and then times that by 1,000, you know,
wow, really?
it's so exciting to go down there the 3 days a week. And a lot of times I wish I could do it more, you know, but there's limited time for these guys because then they have to go over all the data and everything.
So you would do it again?
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And what would you tell somebody that's thinking about doing it?
When I talk to people that are coming in and thinking about doing it, because a lot of people are a little scared because of the surgery and everything.
Right.
And I mean, I look at it as like, how much worse can it be than what I've already gone through?
That's
You
true.
know, and there's always a risk reward, and everything in life that's so rewarding is a risk, you know, and it's like I don't be afraid of the surgery, because first of all, the government wouldn't let this surgery happen without all the things that they have to jump through just to be able to do this for me, you know.
Well, that's why it took 20 years, right,
Yeah.
to get there.
So it's something that the people that are doing it are so qualified that I wasn't afraid at all. So
Oh, that's terrific. And so, John, how long is the trial?
So the trial is open-ended. We have, Scott has signed up for, we sign up for 5 years initially. He can, of course, pull out at any time if he feels, you know, life circumstances change or anything like that.
I don't think he's going to. I think
I don't think he's going to, but he could if he chose to. But I will add that back at the University of Pittsburgh, the second participant, the first one to have the stimulation provided to his brain, he was implanted in May of 2015 and is still participating now. So we can go back to the FDA and say everything looks great, there's no reason to end, and we can get 1 year at a time extensions.
And it's the same electrodes that were implanted?
Same
They're
electrodes,
okay.
now
Wow,
7
that's a long
years
time.
later.
Are you surprised at that, or no?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of
that
surprising.
seems
It's
very-
especially given some critics who say, "Oh, these implants don't last for very long." We now have data to support the idea that they can last for
Yeah,
very,
that's a
very
long
long.
time. That's a long time. So what is the goal or expected outcomes, you know, when this is over?
So I said one goal. So I see it as two goals. The first is refining stimulation so it feels natural. So Scott really feels like, oh, I'm touching something real. I think that's one of the major goals. And the other goal is to really improve hand dexterity.
Okay.
So that, and in particular, applying the right kinds of forces when you're for example, grabbing this glass. For decades now, people have developed brain-machine interfaces in animal models and in humans where they just move an arm in space. But as soon as you're trying to apply forces on a glass or some object, you can't see the errors you're making. The only way you can know whether you're making a mistake is by feeling it. You know, am I applying too much pressure, so I'm going to crush it, or not enough, and it's going to slip? So that's where the stimulation comes in. You know, using stimulation to adjust the right kinds of forces. So force control on objects, and so really manipulating objects, not just grasping, maybe doing other things with objects. So those are the two goals, really, I see.
And so I've heard of other trials. We've funded some other people that want to look at things like this as well. You know, what makes this one different? Is it the addition of the touch and sensation? Is that what makes it different?
That's a key aspect. I mean, in general, also there are other groups that are trying to just improve communication. So like being able to interact with a computer, to like dictate something on a computer, which is it's very promising and important. We're really focused on controlling an arm and a hand for dexterous control, and that will require both controlling forces, controlling motion, and providing that sensory feedback, the touch, and that's what's unique, is controlling limbs or something limb-like.
Right, and it's not just going out. I mean, there has to be feedback.
Something coming back.
And,
Yeah,
you
so
know, I don't think
that's
that
key.
you necessarily think about that as an average, everyday person walking around and doing things and touching things, right? How complicated it really is,
Exactly.
right? All of the processes.
Exactly.
And so, all right, I'm going to ask you, I always do, you know, how far are we from making movement and touch restoration a reality?
Every time somebody asks me that, I say 5 years. But I've said this now for 15 years or 20
Okay,
years.
I'm not asking
So
you.
ask,
How about you,
ask
John?
John.
Yeah.
Ask John.
You know, I think it's going to require a convergence of multiple technologies. I think right now we have the ability to control an arm that moves in space and the ability to grasp kind of open-ended without that grasp force control. That would be a usable device for somebody that is completely paralyzed from the neck down. That would allow them to feed themselves, to move blankets, that kind of thing. We can do that with the technology we have. There's questions about, it would be great for it to be wireless so we don't have something coming through the skin, which poses an infection risk. When, Scott is in the study and we see him 3 times a week and we can clean that area, that's fine. But if somebody was taking this home, they wouldn't necessarily have that kind of care. So we need to develop the wireless technology to do it. And there's different groups also looking at different types of recording technology. The devices we use now were essentially developed in the early 90s. And they work great. And everybody keeps predicting their demise, and they continue to work. So maybe that will be the final device. But I think it would be good to have a few options to choose from before it becomes a clinical device. So
did you give me a year?
No, I did not. We're
Well,
probably looking
that
on the
was
order
sneaky.
of a decade.
I,
But,
Terry, I always say to them, I'm like, you guys, I can control it like really easy, and then they make it harder for me to control because they want to make it more realistic. And it's like, I compare it to back in the day when the calculators came out. Everyone couldn't figure out how to operate a calculator. They made it so easy that anyone could pick up a calculator and use it now. So in my eyes, you guys can make it really easy for anyone to use just through all this computer technology and everything these days.
Well, I'm just happy that BRF is along for the ride, and it's nice to see, basic research that we funded way back when, not that long ago, really, coming to a clinical trial, and that's really what we want to see. And so I'm so thankful for you, being here, doing this, and everybody involved. Look, this clinical trial is not only going to help people with paralysis, could help people with strokes or ALS, right?
Mm-hmm.
And basic understanding of the brain. That's really why we are in business, BRF. We want to understand it, we want to fix it, we want to help. And, that's what I'm so excited about this research in the future and BRF's mission to fund the best neuroscience. So I want to thank you all for being here. I
Well,
think this was wonderful.
Thank you. And I want to thank BRF, too, for all their help over the years. It's been really very valuable, and I appreciated that a lot.
Good, I'm
And-
glad. And we'll continue this relationship, I hope. And John, now that he's here, he can maybe apply for some grants too. We never know.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This was really interesting and wonderful. And so thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having us here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, Nico, John, and Scott. What an interesting discussion. It's simply amazing what can be done in our world today. But of course, it can't be done without friends like you. Thanks for watching, but mostly thanks for your support. It's great to have you with us. Now, before we go, we want to put that donation information on the screen one last time. We're hopeful that after watching, you're more invested in this vital cause and that you will lend your support at thebrf.org/donate. And if you know of anyone you think may be interested in hearing about BRF, tell them they can learn more by watching the program you just did. It will be featured on BRF's website and YouTube channel. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm Rob Johnson. Good night, and we'll see you again next year.